Well, good afternoon. We're going to talk today about some really interesting topics on food rescue and try to tie it into some supply chain issues that we uh, like on this channel. So, thanks, Dave, for joining us. I'm excited about what you guys are doing and how we can work together to support you guys. So, tell me about you and a little bit about the origin of the Food Rescue US program.
Thanks, Dustin, and happy to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me and Food Rescue to participate. So my name is Dave Lambert. I am the CEO of a national nonprofit called Food Rescue US. And what we do is we rescue food that would otherwise be thrown out, and we pick up the food from all kinds of businesses, particularly grocery stores, restaurants, corporate events, hotels, farmers markets, bakeries, and we deliver that food to places that are in need of food, which are primarily social service agencies like food pantries, soup kitchens, shelters, places like that. And we do that all over the country. We're in 24 states in the District of Columbia right now and 43 different sites. So in terms of the origin, right, we were founded in 2011 in Fairfield County in Connecticut. Organization was originally called Community Plates. It was founded by two guys. One's a pastor and one's a tech guy. And they saw all of this good, healthy, fresh, nutritious food going to waste. And they put their heads together and figured that there had to be a way to direct this food out of landfills and to where it could go to feed folks who were food insecure. So they created an app, a web app, to help facilitate all of the food transfers and launched, back 12 years ago. And the organization grew over time. And I think by around 2019, beginning of 2020, we were in about 6 sites in 3 states. And then during the pandemic, there was a tremendous increase in food insecurity across the country as folks were out of work, as folks couldn't get to the store, and the organization really exploded. And, to the point that, as I mentioned, now we're in 43 sites in 24 states.
I was, as I was looking around at how Civic can have more of a philanthropy role and support. We do public procurement consulting work, and we work around the country in support of directly and indirectly on supply chain and logistics issues. And I had really tried to find a combo that would be interesting and compelling to my team and then people in our audience. And I came towards the food stuff just because I see just from going to conferences and being involved. I mean, obviously, when people are building food plans for catering programs, I mean, they they can't have too little food because then people are sitting around with not enough food, right? But then there's a lot of food, and I see all the food that tends to not be consumed, and it bothers me. And so I started really being interested in trying to find a group like yours that we could support. And I've become more and more aware of it. So talk to me about food waste. One of the stats on your site says that up to 40% of the U.S. food supply ends up being wasted, which is kind of a startling statistic. So what numbers do you have, and what are some of the reasons that you see it happening?
Yeah, it is a startling statistic, but it is a true and validated statistic that around 40% of the U.S. food supply goes to waste. That comes, all across the food supply chain, starting at farms and going through to food manufacturers, food processors, and then the places where we go, which are, food distributors of one kind or another. Like I said, whether it's grocery stores, restaurants, corporate events, hotels, places like that. So why does so much food go to waste? That's a really good question. A fair bit of it, 45% is at the consumer level, right? So this is stuff that people buy at the store and they bring home with all the best intentions, and for whatever reason, it doesn't end up getting prepared and eaten. But then, there's food, like I said, at kind of every step of this supply chain. So the total is staggering. It's about 180 billion, with a B, billion pounds of food that are going to waste every year. And then on the flip side, right, in terms of hunger, right, there's a lot of statistics around this. And right now there's about 44 million Americans that suffer food insecurity at some point during the year. So if that food was able to all be diverted and directed to folks who need it, there wouldn't be any hunger in this country whatsoever. But food does end up going to waste quite often.
Well, I wrote a little article yesterday, just from stuff I've learned from your site, and then looking around, just trying to encapsulate some of it for me. So some issues around like supply chain inefficiency, food not actually getting to where it needs to go, overproducing and over ordering. They tend to, restaurants and caterers have to order more food than maybe they know for sure they're going to do, because they can't have a risk of running out. Quality standards, supermarkets can reject something that doesn't meet a cosmetic standard with slight imperfections. I'll come back to that one. Cultural expectations about like the ways that we eat, and then lack of infrastructure for food redistribution were some of the things that I had highlighted. I think when you and I talked, the quality standard thing came up, like whereas a restaurant may make use of food that has slight imperfections, a grocery store, if one egg is cracked out of 12, they're going to get rid of the 12, or you had some interesting stories there.
Yeah,
So
exactly right. Exactly right. So we show up at the back of grocery stores, some of them 5 or 7 days a week, and there's boxes and boxes and bags of food that they aren't selling for one reason or another. And so you mentioned eggs, for example. So grocery stores don't have somebody in the back who's repacking eggs, right? So if one egg is broken in a carton, right, that's they are going to get rid of the rest of that carton of eggs. If there's a bag of oranges and one orange is a little bit brown, they are going to get rid of that whole bag of oranges. Or a bag of lettuce has one brown leaf, right? A restaurant will take off the brown leaf and they'll put the good lettuce into a salad, but a grocery store will deem that they don't have somebody, again, kind of repackaging that lettuce, so they'll get rid of that. Meat that is a few days before expiration, right? They put that in the freezer, and then we pick it up, and it's perfectly good to use. And on the event side, it's interesting. I was speaking with a chef at a major hotel that does a lot of events. And she was telling me that, if they have 100 people coming in and there's like a choice of chicken or beef or fish, right? Mm-hmm. They want to make sure that everyone's going to get their first choice of selection. So they won't quite do 300, but they'll do maybe 60 or 70 of each of those 3 items, right? And so then, at the end of it, if 100 people each took, their one item, right, there's going to be over 100 completely, beautiful and delicious servings that are left over. And so we'll go and we'll pick up, typically they'll put that food in the refrigerator for us. We'll pick it up either that same day or the next day, and we'll bring it to mm-hmm. a soup kitchen that will serve that food right away.
Another thing I've noticed just in dabbling on your website, and then there's there's an app that in Austin that does a similar thing, but more you can purchase something in that style. How often that bakeries and places that make bread or bagels or things like that, they're not going to retain something over 2 days because it's not going to consider to be at a fresh point. So there's tons of production that happens out of bakeries that just from what the consumer is going to buy and what people are going to want to sell, that they're going to produce food that then otherwise is going to absolutely go to waste. So, I mean, talk about the bakery characteristic from what you've seen with that.
Yeah, Absolutely. It's just as you said, bakeries have a ton of excess food because they bake every day, right? People want, particularly when it comes to bread, when it comes to bagels, things like that, people want day of food. And so we pick up at bagel shops, 5 or 7 days a week. We pick up at bakeries, again, usually
Mhm.
whenever they're open, all the stuff that doesn't get sold that day, and it's perfectly good. I mean, if you came into the bagel shop at 4 o'clock, right, you would buy the same bagel that they give to us at 4:45 in the afternoon. Grocery stores now have all gotten into the fresh baked goods area as well. So if you go into a ShopRite or a Whole Foods, they have these huge bakeries. So a lot, so there's always a good supply of bread out there, and it all gets put to good use, right? There's folks who are hungry, and this is good food. It's nutritious food. It's fresh food.
So let's hit on the issue about the food insecurity and the hunger, which is the flip side of the production problem. So how are you identifying social service type entities, and what value do you feel that the activity that you guys are doing are providing to both the ability of those social service entities to meet their mission? And I mean, who are they serving when you talk about the food insecurity? Like what kind of information do you have for people who maybe are hearing about some of this stuff and it's the first time they've really dug into the topic?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for that. So there are literally thousands of social service agencies around the country who provide food to those who are hungry, right? So, just about every community you can imagine, even what people think of as the wealthiest communities, have folks living there who are food insecure, right? We were founded in Fairfield County. It's one of the richest counties in the country. It has towns like Greenwich and Darien and New Canaan. Each of these towns has a food pantry. Each of them has a soup kitchen. And a lot of these folks are working people, right? But the minimum wage, in many places is just not enough to provide, food on the table for every meal. And particularly for kids, it's really devastating to have to go to school hungry. It makes it very hard to learn, hard to concentrate, and even just not knowing where your next meal is coming from can be very stressful on families, and on the parents, on the kids, and on everybody. So there, as I said, there's 44 million people in this country who go through food security. Sometimes it's not the entire year. Sometimes it's part of the year. There are government programs, right? But those are limited. They have different kinds of means testing and rules that have to be followed. And so, if you talk to anybody at a food pantry or soup kitchen, they'll tell you that, benefits run out, right? And at the end of the month, they get busier because people need to stretch their paychecks, to cover their rent. Rents have gone up a lot. There's been a lot of inflation for food and for everything. So anything we can do that helps alleviate that is tremendously beneficial, right? And so a lot of these places would have to buy food if we were not providing it to them for free. And that's what we do. We never, ever charge anybody for the food that we provide.
So, and then while it's secondary to the topic that we just described, but directly a benefit of what you're doing is the food that otherwise is not going to people for whatever reason, cosmetic, right at age, whatever. The alternative to going to people is it's going into the landfill, and it's actually contributing to both use of space in landfills that otherwise wouldn't have to be in, and indirectly then things like methane gas and so forth. So talk a little bit about the impact of solving the problem, not just because it's good for people, but because otherwise the food is going to go somewhere and rot.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we do have a dual mission, right? Our first mission is feeding those who are hungry and are suffering from food insecurity. The second mission, though, as you mentioned, is keeping food out of landfills. And there is, the space and the cost of transporting it, but really most urgently and importantly, food that goes to landfills, as it degrades, it creates methane gas, right? And methane is one of the most potent causes of climate change, right? So food waste, there's a lot of statistics around this. Food waste contributes globally about 8% of climate change, right? That's more than the aviation industry globally, right? So think about all those planes flying every day. If food waste were a country, right, it would be the third largest contributor to climate change, right behind China and the US. So there's a huge impact of food that goes to landfills as well.
That was cool. That was not on your website. You ought to put that on the website. That's a good one. Definitely, I think helps get people attention. So, by taking some action here, not only can we help people and just, not deal with just pure raw waste, we're helping in multiple compounding ways. So how exactly are you going about all this? So we've talked about the problem and some of the reasons why we want to solve the problem. So what are the ways that you guys have created to impact this problem? Talk about the volunteer base, talk about the application or the web-based application, and how you're actually making all these trains run.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. It's a complex operation on the one hand, but it's very simple for volunteers. So what we do, I mentioned those 43 sites, right? So every one of those sites has a site director, right? And what they do is they kind of are behind the scenes putting it all together. So they work with the food donors. When are they going to have food? What's the right time to pick it up? Then they match that food donation up with a local agency, usually within even 5, maybe max 10 miles away from, sometimes across the street, literally. But close by, and then they create what we call a rescue, right? So, and it's all managed on our app. So if you are a volunteer and you go on our app, you can see all the available rescues in your area. So it will say, hey, please go to Trader Joe's in Darien, Connecticut, at 10:30 on Tuesday morning. We have an open rescue, and that food is going, 5 miles away to, New Covenant Center in Stamford, Connecticut, for example. And so as a volunteer, you go on the app and you could see all these available rescues, and you just click a button that says, I'll do it. And there's more information in there. Do you need a sedan, or is it a big rescue and you need an SUV? So you get the information there a lot. There's also a button that says, I'd like to adopt this rescue. So many of our volunteers do that, which means they are committing basically to pick up that rescue and do it on a weekly basis or some other kind of regular schedule. And then things do come up, people's schedules change. And then if you sign up to do a rescue and you can't do it, you just click another button that says release, and it goes back into the pool. So then all the other local volunteers who are active in our app can go in and they can see what rescues are available and adopt them. So it all runs off of technology, right? We have a portal for the food donors. We have a portal for the social service agencies. The site directors kind of do these matches, and then the volunteers have the app on their phone and they just select the rescues, and it helps direct them. There's a link to a map, and it really, it's very easy to do. There's no training required. You don't need to do a tutorial. You can just download the app off of our website and you're good to go in your local area.
Interesting. So how many volunteers do you guys tend to keep as a base with this program?
So right now we have about 10,000 active volunteers. So these are folks who are doing rescues at least in the last couple of months, and many of them every week. We even have people that do food rescues every day. So, around the country, we'll do in those 43 sites around right now around 10 or 11,000 rescues every month. And again, these are all volunteers, right? They're all good-spirited, civic-minded folks who are taking their own time and their own car and doing these food transfers from the food donors to where the food is needed at these folks who distribute food at food pantries and soup kitchens.
And I've gone in and I've used the app already. Tried to. It's really easy to sign up. You can see the location. Sometimes, I haven't done one yet because I'm still want to make sure I don't agree to do one that's on the other side of town and then I can't get there. But I'm going to play with it on the weekend and I'm going to go do a couple. And it seems, really easy to dip your toe into and make a contribution.
Yeah, it's a great volunteer activity because you can do it on your own schedule, right? You can see when there's rescues available and you can pick a time that works for you. A lot of people do this as a family. They will bring their kids along with them so they can really, have a hands-on experience of volunteering, of helping to solve the food hunger crisis, and participate actively in helping those less fortunate.
So, so that's how people can be involved with some direct work. I asked you before about actual contributions, and it goes to keep your lean and mighty team, making sure that all of these trains and airports or the air traffic control is running and that things are working. So, you guys are doing a matching drive right now for contributions and being matched by your board. So maybe talk a little bit about if, in addition to actually doing some of the work, if people want to support the mission that you're working on, how they can do that, and the matching the matching initiative that you're doing right now.
Yeah, thanks for that. We are running this time of year. Folks are probably used to seeing that a lot of nonprofit organizations like Food Rescue US are trying to raise money, right? We, as I said earlier, we give our product away for free, right? So we are dependent on, a combination of funding sources. We do get some money from foundations, give us some grants, and we have some corporate partners like civic initiatives that help support us. But the bulk of our funding comes from individuals, right? And so you can go on our website 24 hours a day and make a contribution. And as you mentioned, we have a board of directors, and they have pledged right now to match up to $60,000 of any donation. So we do operate a very leanly and efficiently, as you mentioned, right? So for every dollar donated, we are able to deliver 18 meals. That's 18 meals for every dollar. So now, right, with that with that board match, that dollar is actually delivering 36 meals because it is being matched by our board of directors. So it's an exciting time of year. We watch the support come in, but there's always more food and more need out there. And so we are trying to raise more money so we can increase our impact. We can open new sites in other parts of the country as well.
That's great. You mentioned our support, and I do want to talk about that, but let me take a different topic first so that we're kind of closing the loop all the way. So this audience tends to be procurement oriented, supply chain thinking, logistics thinking. So, one thing I've thought of for government procurement people is we can influence the market by how we ask for requirements and how we think about things. And so a lot of people who may be watching this or listening to this, they're involved in purchasing catering or setting up like long-term commissary relationships and everything from jails to hospitals to schools. And so being able to even simply ask, do you have a plan for food reuse, or do you participate in food reuse programs as a component of the way that they set up ongoing contracting relationships with food suppliers, helps to show that government cares about this topic. And so you can, by even asking, do you have a plan, or do you have a method to try to reduce food waste? Government can have influence on the market because it is a purchaser of services. So I think that's a very interesting way to influence. And I think that corporations ought to think about how, and hotels and food suppliers, they ought to be proactively thinking about how they will have a food reuse program and how they will participate in a food reuse program. So how do you get corporations, how do you get the providers of food to put this on their list? You mentioned Trader Joe's was a partner of what you guys are doing. So, I mean, obviously you guys have to get out and talk to food producers. So both, what do you see in terms of like the corporate buy-in of the producers of food to be committed to this kind of work? And then, maybe you can pick up that concept that I just threw out, that government can at least indirectly influence by asking people it contracts with if they have those kind of plans.
Yeah, it's a great point. And so we do try and influence however we can corporations who are planning meetings or have corporate cafeterias, things like that. So we work with folks who are from a sustainability role or an ESG role or some corporate responsibility, those things like that. And yeah, not only can you ask, do you have a plan in an RFP, but you can say, tell me, what is your plan? Or we have a lot of organizations who mandate, right, that, hey, we're going to be holding this meeting at this place, and you need to tell us how that food is going to be picked up at the end of the event and reused and distributed to where it is most needed. So that can be part of any RFP, whether it's coming from the government or anybody else who is planning an event or has a cafeteria or whatever it is. So we are seeing that increasingly as, something that folks are paying more attention to. We try and do our part to increase awareness, and, and it has a great positive impact because right. Folks want those contracts, and, and then what's great is they get really excited because, the folks who work in food prep, in a conference center or something like that, they don't like to throw out food either. But right. They often haven't been given a alternative,
Well, to go way off of food for a second and use a parallel, because sometimes people are concerned that if you add that kind of stuff or ask for kind of stuff, you're going to increase cost. But to go way outside of food, that's been a classic conversation for toner cartridges, for printers, that asking for things like printer cartridges that are recyclable or reusable or compostable will impact cost. And in those situations, simply asking for it as an alternative, we can see whether there's actually a cost or not, right? So, and I mean, in practice, asking for recyclable and reusable and recompostable printer cartridges has not generally proven to be a higher cost, because the market then tends to see that that's what people want to have. And so even if there's concern that, well, by asking for that, it's going to inflate cost to my end user, I think smart procurement people can think about how they ask for that to test the market, to see whether it will actually have impact and to flow. But to your point, these corporations, they don't want to waste the food either. And so those of them who already have chosen to have a strategy and a plan should get an opportunity to be rewarded for that kind of things. And people who haven't implemented a plan, if they see it in 1 or 2 or 3 documents, then it will penetrate the marketing process to say, do we have a corporate responsibility here, and should we start?
Absolutely. And, the good news about food recovery is, I mentioned that we don't charge agencies to distribute the food, right? We also never charge food donors to pick up the food, right? And we're not the only ones who pick up food, right? There's lots of other wonderful food rescue organizations. So if it's a city or a town where we don't operate, the odds are very high that there is somebody else operating who will pick up that food for free. Yes, you often have to make a phone call and figure out, and do a little bit of logistics, but there's really, there should be no cost, right, to an organization to donate food. They just have to, wrap it up, put it in the refrigerator, and be ready for somebody to come to the loading dock to pick it up.
Right. There have been some comments on the side. I've tried not to overly pull them in just because I had a set of things I wanted to go through. And a couple of them I'll probably, take online or as a follow up. One was just said that I think actually is probably really valuable for the podcast topic, and I'm going to assume that you're going to agree with me on what I'm getting ready to say. So there was a question about that some organizations are worried about donating food because they might be sued if somebody got sick. And I actually am pretty sure I know the answer to that one, which is there was a Good Samaritan law that was passed in the 90s that protects people from liability for donating food in good faith to something that feeds people in need. So are you familiar with the Good Samaritan law? And I assume that that's something that you guys have had to educate some people on.
We are very familiar with that law. And in fact, we were part of a group that helped strengthen that law. So there was an additional bill passed just in January of this year that helped provide an additional layer of protection. There were some institutions, particularly schools, for whatever reason, were very concerned about that. So this amendment to that law provides even greater protection. So yes, there is no liability for food donors. And it's also, I should say, it's incredibly rare. I mean, I've asked, I'm relatively new to our organization. I've asked, have we ever in the lifetime of the organization heard of any issue relating to food that we provided? And the answer was no, right? The agencies check the food also. They make sure that it's proper quality and been stored and transported properly before distributing it. And so, it's incredibly rare to virtually non-existent for there to be issues relating to that. And even if there were, right, it would not come back to the food donor, thanks to those Good Samaritan laws.
Interesting. Well, good. Well, so as we kind of get to the wrap, I wanted to keep this to, roughly a half hour or so. I did want to bring up the what you mentioned, that we've agreed to do some support. So, I have long wanted to find something that I thought might be a good fit or a good, interesting fit for both people that work for me and for Civic in general. And the food issue, I think I saw on campus, like on my son's campus, there's a separate organization that tries to create like college, some of this kind of thing at a college campus level with the college kids. And I had looked at that, but then I was like, that's not really exactly what I want to do for Civic. But as I dug and I found you guys, I felt like this is something I can be inspired by because I feel directly affected by it because of how many conferences that we go to, and some of the supply chain characteristics are motivating to my team. So I'm really, I'm very interested in it. So we made we connected pretty recently because we needed to get a new person on board for you to have a conversation. But so we're making a commitment to do a flat contribution now in this year. And then we've made a commitment to do a portion of every client dollar that comes through here as a continuing contribution to you guys in 2024. I also want to try to find some opportunities to both have some of my folks get out and get this app, and actually, if they're in an area where they can use it, go and do it. And then when we have some situations where we're gathering multiple folks together for either team planning or whatnot, maybe get out and actually, connect with some of the food pantries and so forth. So I think it'll be an inspiring kind of thing for our group, and we're excited to give back that way. I mean, I don't know how you've mentioned some corporate sponsors. I mean, how are you seeing corporations interest in this kind of stuff? And, how are you, how can we continue to support you guys and what you guys are doing?
Well, thank you for that. Dustin, we're so grateful for your interest in supporting Food Rescue US. So on behalf of the organization, we thank you and Civic Initiatives for both the financial contribution, which is, critical to us continuing and building and growing our work, along with, this kind of opportunity to help spread the word about Food Rescue, not only our organization, but just the issues involved and the importance of support from the general public. And then, yeah, we love to have partners who want to help at a variety of levels. So we have partners who, just like you guys, where their teams volunteer, right, and rescue food in the areas where we have operations. And then look, as I said, there's either agencies serving food insecure or even food rescue operations, in just about every community around the country. So if you don't see one of our sites, volunteer somewhere else. It's all good, and it all helps to address both food insecurity and climate change. So we love corporate partnerships because they're multifaceted, right? There's usually a financial contribution, but there's also, the opportunity to leverage opportunities like this in terms of publicity, and then volunteerism, which is, really the engine that keeps us moving, is all those 10,000 plus volunteers that drive food around 365 days a week in service to feeding the hungry.
Well, excellent. Well, thanks so much, Dave. I have appreciated how agile you guys are on helping us figure out how to come up with a plan and get going. We're very interested in what you guys your team is doing, and we look forward to continuing to find ways to raise this topic and to be part of your extended team.
Well, thank you, Dustin, and I look forward to working together going forward, and maybe coming back on your live stream at a later date as well to catch up and see how things are going.
Absolutely. Well, thanks everyone for taking part of your lunch hour, and I hope we gave you something that was inspiring. So have a great holidays, and we'll do another one of these again in the new year.
Thank you, and happy holidays to everybody. Wishing you all a healthy and safe 2024.
Exactly.